Healing with crystals is an ancient practice. Yet did you know that the essence of gemstones can be used in homeopathy? Spiritual awakening, self-awareness, and intuition are some of the gifts that gemstone remedies can bring to your life. Homeopath, teacher, and author Giovanna will show you a different perspective on the healing properties of these magical gemstones. Join us in Gemstones and Crystals in Homeopathy and discover the power of gemstone remedies.
Hey, Giovanna Franklin here, and welcome to Gemstones and Crystals in Homeopathy. And today I have two different topics for you. The first one is the question, is crystal healing really a witchy thing? And the reason why I'm asking this is because a few weeks ago, I was on Facebook and I came across this advert for a crystal shop. And the crystal shop, the name of this shop was something like witch, something or other, something involving magic and things like that. And I thought to myself, are we still there? Do we really need to go there? Do we still need to do that in order to attract people? And I know that sometimes, it's done as, in jest. It's a bit ironic. It's a bit tongue in cheek. But still, I think that sometimes, even today, crystal healing, homeopathy are seen as something that belongs to the witchy corner. And so tonight I want to show you that this really should not be the case. And I will tell you why by going into a little bit of history of the actual witch hunt. So I don't know if it ever happened to you, if you are into holistic modalities, that somebody made a comment, sometimes not meaning anything bad by it, maybe a joke, say, oh yeah, you're a little witch, or sometimes even a downright negative comment about what you do. Or sometimes people say to me, oh, I don't believe in homeopathy, or you need to believe in it for homeopathy to work. And I'm thinking, well, homeopathy is not a cult. It's not a religion. I'm not trying to convert anybody in the same way that a doctor is not trying to convert you into believing in medicine. It's just a type of medicine. I had a friend of mine who once asked me for help for her mother because her mother was in terrible pain. She was waiting for a hip replacement operation. And in the meantime, she was on morphine because she was in so much pain, but even the morphine was not giving her any relief. So she asked me if I could do something. So I met her mother. And at first she said, no, I don't want this because I'm a Christian and I don't want to use whatever it is that you're doing. And so, okay, so I let it go. Eventually she changed her mind because she was in so much pain that she was desperate, and she did not regret it, of course. She felt much better after that, and she did not even need the morphine after a while. So that was that. But, this is just to show you this kind of thinking that some people still have. And I even had an email just a couple of days ago when I started to talk about this on my social media. And this lady said to me, thank you so much for bringing this subject up, because I am so interested in crystals and healing and homeopathy. But I am wondering, is this compatible with my religion, because I'm a Christian? And I said, yes, I'm going to explain why this is totally compatible. And so when I was at university, I did a course on the history of witch hunt in Europe. Okay, so the witch hunt, we all know, started in the Middle Ages. And officially, the official witch hunt started in 1486, when a couple of obscure monks with, I think, severe mummy issues wrote a big book called the Malleus Maleficarum, which is Latin for the hammer of evil. Now, who were these monks? So these two monks were, like I said, obscure monks. They were not important people. They were living in a small village in Germany. Their names were Heinrich Kramer and Jakob Sprenger. And when I say they had mummy issues, is because they seem to have a very unhealthy obsession with women and how women were evil in their view. And so before they wrote that book, which is a big book, by the way, and it's a kind of manual, a very detailed manual on how to recognize witches, and they detail all the witchy practices and what they do and so on. But before they went to that, they decided to write to the Pope and advise the Pope that there were witches where they lived, doing evil things, consorting with the devil, practicing magic, flying at night on broomsticks and doing all this stuff. And they were asking the Pope to intervene and do something about it, because obviously the situation could not continue, could not be allowed to continue. So the Pope at the time received the letter and replied politely in Latin, something along the lines of, yeah, thank you for the heads up. I hope you find the help that you obviously need, and I'll come back to you. So basically, the Pope completely ignored them. He thought that was bananas and didn't do anything about it. So frustrated by the failed attempt, they decided, first of all, to write a proper book, which was the Malleus Maleficarum, on witchcraft, how it works, what it does, how it's practiced, who practices, and so on. And then they sent that book to the Pope again, but this time they also enclosed a letter with a kind of petition with signatures of dozens of important names of the clergy in Germany at the time. So cardinals and bishops and, all important people, to confirm the fact that this was real. It was a real emergency. The Pope had to do something about it, because, you couldn't swing a cat without hitting a witch, apparently, around that time. So this time the Pope took notice, because of course he saw the names of all these people. The Pope didn't know that all those names and all those signatures were completely forged. It was the two monks who forged all the signatures, made up the names and everything, and sent it all out. The Pope didn't know that, but of course, seeing all these names and seeing, a book printed, done. So if it's in a book, it must be true. So he started the whole thing, the committees and then inquisitions, and that's how the whole ball started to roll. And it lasted for 3 or 4 centuries in Europe, depending on the country. I know that the US has a separate history with witch hunt, but in Europe it lasted about 4 centuries, I would say. And it's estimated that about 20 million people were burnt, tortured, murdered, because of these kind of accusations. So the whole thing was based on a lie, and it was really tragic. So I think this this incident, let's say this historical event, which went on for so long, affected our culture, our psyche so much that we are still affected by it today. And of course, the church went all in to condemn all sorts of practices, any practice that did not conform to whatever the church was saying at the time, which we know that, it changes with time, depending on the times, the politics, the countries, the culture, and so on and so on. So this is what still, I believe, affects us as, in our culture, whether we are practicing Christians or not, but it's still in our culture. However, as I said, this started in 1486, right? So the middle of the Middle Ages, let's say. In fact, it's almost close to the Renaissance period. But what happened before? What was going on before then? Because we are used to consider the Middle Ages as a big lump of history. So it's a big chunk of history, all Middle Ages, between the end, the fall of the Roman Empire, 5th century until Renaissance, 16th century. That's all lumped in together as, the Dark Ages. And it's all bad. It's all superstition. It's all fear. It's all diseases and pestilence. And there's nothing good about it. That's not the case. Of course, there were ups and downs, because that's the history. That's what happens in history all the time. It happens in our times. The decades are not the same from one to the other. So before that happened, before those two guys decided to ruin crystal healing for everybody, it's not like the concept, the perception, or the word witchcraft did not exist. Of course, it always existed. Of course, the concept of what was considered magic or witchcraft always existed. It started with humanity. However, it always changed depending on the times, the culture, the politics. So magic always existed, but what is perceived as magic, of course, changed over time, and it changed all the time. So let's go back in time from 1486 and go into the 12th century. And the 12th century was actually a very exciting time in our history, at least in Europe, because we could have people like Hildegard of Bingen, Saint Hildegard of Bingen. Now, who was she? Hildegard was a Benedictine abbess, and she lived in Germany, Bingen. So once again, Germany is there, big night for Germany today. And she was, I would say, the Leonardo da Vinci of her time. She was incredibly well educated, but more than that, she was an accomplished musician. She was a composer. She left a lot of music to us that it's still played today. She was a herbalist. She was scientist, I would say, because she experimented. She studied the herbs empirically. She studied the effects of certain herbs, and she used crystals, believe it or not. She wrote a few books, and one of these books is called Physica, where she wrote her prescriptions to heal various ailments, and she would heal with herbs, with flower essences, kind of like Bach flowers that we know today, and crystals. She wrote about the 12 crystals of the soul, as she called them, which were the crystals that she knew best and that she would employ in her healing sessions. She was also a mystic. She had visions. She was, I would say, today we would probably call her a psychic medium. She received messages, downloads, we would say, today. And was she considered strange or crazy or a witch? Not at all. She was so revered and she was so famous all around Europe that she had princes and emperors and the Pope going to see her to get her wisdom, to get healing, to listen to her. She was considered incredibly wise. It is said that she, in fact, she predicted the date of her own death, and she was declared saint. I don't know how long after her death, but she is now known as Saint Hildegard. And so she was so much ahead of her time that she wrote about women's sexuality, for example. I mean, it was, I think, the 1960s before we learned, or somebody bothered to talk about and write about and research women's sexuality again in the West. So think about that. She was absolutely incredible, and we still have her books to prove what she did and what she was capable of. And not only that, but she was not even the only one, because of course she was a teacher. So she was also teaching the other nuns in her abbey, and this was perfectly fine. Nobody mentioned that this was witchcraft or whatever it was. Bear in mind that there were very, very few doctors at the time, because only the king and the aristocracy could afford doctors. And so medicine, what was called medicine, had to come from women, first of all, because women were the ones who stayed at home and they were responsible for everybody's well-being in the family. And the only way they had to stay healthy, the only thing they had available were herbs. And so every family had kitchen herbs. They were growing kitchen herbs and healing herbs in their garden. It was perfectly normal. And of course, crystals were not available to everybody because of the cost, but they were considered just like plants. I mean, crystals, when you think about it, they are like fruit. They grow from the earth just like plants. So why should they be treated with suspicion? So it was a completely different time, a completely different perception. And so I just wanted to show you that this is not incompatible with religious belief, because we're talking about nature. So she was like a naturopath. She was the ultimate naturopath for that century. But like I said, she was not the only one. The 12th century was an incredible, beautiful time for women, because there was this movement called the Beguines, which started in the Netherlands, in the Flanders, and then spread to France, north of Italy, Germany, in Scandinavia. And this movement was made of lay women who would decide to join a community, a religious community, like an abbey, but they would not be compelled. For example, there was a lot of freedom with that, so they could join this community and live together, pray together, and they were recognized by the local bishop. They would do charity work for the community, so they did a lot of good for the community, but it also provided company and shelter and companionship for those women, for example, who had been widowed, who were in really difficult financial circumstances. But also aristocratic women could go there if they wished. And so it was a really egalitarian kind of environment. And the women were free to leave the community if they wanted, if they decided to get married, for example, or remarry. So and this was an environment where the women had a lot of freedom socially. When you think about it, at the time, your only choice as a woman was to get married, really. And if you were a widow, if you lost your husband, very often that would also mean losing your income. And so there may have been a lot of women who wanted to pursue a more independent kind of life. Of course, they were religious because everybody was at the time. And so this way of life would give them the freedom to study, for example, to read, to learn a skill like learning to sew or learning how to heal using herbs and things like that. And it was perfectly accepted, and indeed society benefited from that. So that was a very, very exciting period in that, from that point of view. I think it didn't last long, surprisingly. Once the witch hunt was in earnest on its way, these beguinage, as they were called, were closed, and the whole movement died. But this is really to show you that, first of all, the Middle Ages is not a one monoblock of badness and darkness, and also that the church was not always against these healing practices, these holistic healing practices. And like I said, crystals are the same as fruits. They are natural fruits, and that's why I called my book Gifts from the Earth. It's natural gifts that we get from Mother Earth. Another thing that I found interesting while researching the history of witch hunt is that there are some herbs that it was claimed witches would take to commune, to invoke the devil. Basically, there were hallucinogenic natural herbs like stramonium, which is also called the devil's trumpet, but it's also called the angel's trumpet, interestingly, or henbanes, which in homeopathy we know as hyoscyamus, and belladonna. And all these herbs belong to the Solanaceae family, and they contain a psychoactive substance which is called tropane, which is a hallucinogenic. And one of the effects of these hallucinogenic is that you think you're flying. And historians think that this is where the myth or the image of the flying witch on a broom comes from, because these people would take would drink a brew made from these herbs and hallucinate and think that they were flying. They were doing all sorts of stuff, but they also had these horrific, very scary hallucinations that were probably thought of as demonic visions, and seeing the devil or communing with the devil, and so on and so forth. I think personally that the two monks who started all this must have drunk some of that. That's my opinion. I cannot prove it, but it sounds to me like they were probably, in addition to having some mental health issues, they also probably took some funny stuff that made them hallucinate, and and that's how they thought up all those things. I mean, if you read the Malleus Maleficarum, it's insane. So these are all things that they completely made up. So I hope this has, if not convinced you, but anyway, I hope this brings a little bit of clarity in why our culture is still a little bit confused when it comes to dealing with crystals and gemstones. I think it's still the reason why homeopaths are still a little bit behind in using gemstones as homeopathic remedies, because there is still this kind of stigma. And this is why, in my opinion, we don't need to evoke that kind of stuff, the magic or the mystery, the witchy thing, unless you really are into Wicca, you identify or you follow that particular religion or beliefs or whatever it is. That's fine if that is your conscious decision to follow that. But otherwise, we don't need to go there, because the minute you call something magic or witchy, you are pigeonholing yourself. You're backing yourself into a corner, and you are closing a door, because everybody will say, oh, right, okay, so that's the witchy corner. I'm not really into that. And okay, it's probably not going to do anything useful anyway, because it's all superstition. Whereas if you leave it open, if you leave the door open and you say, hey, this is a healing medium, there is room for research. There is room for people trying and see for themselves what it can do, and it leads to other possibilities. Okay, so I think this is a good time for a break, and when we come back, I will talk about Tanzanite. So see you soon.
OMTimes TV. In my book, Gifts from the Earth, I illustrate the healing properties of 12 gemstone remedies. You will see real case studies from my practice and dive into the wonderful world of gemstone remedies. This is a clear and practical guide on how to use gemstones in homeopathy. Whether you are an experienced practitioner or beginner, you will find this book a fascinating read. Gifts from the Earth is available on Amazon. Imagine becoming a super influencer. Reinvent yourself, invest in your brand, and then manifest your success with a robust spheric approach. OMTimes Media and Broadcasting offers a unique and multifaceted way to become the spiritual and conscious influencer you deserve to be by putting your message across our powerful platform with its proven record of integrity and excellence. Through our produced shows, OMTimes offers the opportunity to become a social media TV personality, a radio show host, an OMTimes magazine columnist, and a syndicated podcaster, all in one shot. By live streaming your show on OMTimes TV and broadcasting it across the extensive OMTimes radio and TV networks, you become more than a host. You become an ambassador and a force for positive change. OMTimes. Open yourself to the possibilities.
If I could be you, and you could be me for just 1 hour. If we could find a way to get inside each other's minds. Walk a mile in my shoes. Walk a mile in my shoes. Well, before you abuse, criticize, and accuse. Walk a mile in my shoes.
Hi, welcome back. So now it's time to talk about Tanzanite. Okay, so what is Tanzanite? Tanzanite is a precious stone. Now, I said before that there are officially 4 precious stones in gemology, and they are diamond, emerald, sapphire, and ruby. But Tanzanite would qualify because it's quite rare. It's only found in Tanzania in Africa, and that's why it's called Tanzanite. And it's pretty hard on the Moore scale. It's between 6 and 7, so kind of like ruby. And it's very, very, I was going to say it's very, very pretty, yes. But it also reflects the light very much when it's cut. So it's a beautiful blue marine color. Like I said, it's only found in Tanzania, but it was only discovered in 1967. And so that means, from my point of view, from the healing, crystal healing point of view and homeopathic point of view, that there is no lore behind it. There is no folklore. There is no tradition behind it. Nobody ever wrote about it, like we have in ruby that has been used for thousands of years. We find writings in Ayurvedic medicine, Indian medicine, and so on. There's nothing like that with Tanzanite. And so we don't know anything about, we don't know what it can do, basically. Okay, so that's what I mean. And that is why I would like to do a group proving of Tanzanite. So what is a proving? What is a group proving? So like I said before, every remedy in homeopathy, when it's a new remedy, it has to be tested, just like any new pharmaceutical drug has to be tested. And, you have 2 groups. You have the placebo, double blind, etc. We do the same or something very similar with homeopathy, with new remedies, except we don't test on animals. We use healthy students of homeopathy. And so what happens is that, first of all, the substance has to be turned into a remedy. And in the case of a crystal, it's actually quite simple because there is no trituration involved. We don't need to chop up roots or flowers or do any boiling. What we do is we use the immersion method. And so we would take a piece of Tanzanite. Now, first of all, the stone, the gemstone, needs to be genuine and needs to be a good quality. So it would be immersed in water, a container full of distilled water, preferably a glass container with a glass lid. And then this container would be exposed for 24 hours to the sun and the moon. And after the 24 hours, the water is basically your elixir. That's your mother tincture if it was a plant. And this is what we test. Now, when we have that water, it's not potentized yet, which means it's not diluted and dynamized, so it's not gone through the potentization process that remedies go through to get to the various potencies. But that can be good enough to do a first proving. So what happens in a group proving? What I've done before, because the students the provers are from all different parts of the world, so we each individually do this process of immersing the gemstone and creating the elixir and then taking. We agree beforehand how many doses a day for a week, and we all agree to write down everything that happens, all the effects that we feel on the physical level, on the emotional level, on the mental level. Sometimes there are dreams that come through that relate to the remedy, the substance. And then after a week, we're also encouraged to meditate with the elixir, even without taking it. So I leave it quite open to provers, particularly if I know they are intuitive and they're quite sensitive. So I leave it open to the single provers to do with the remedy what they feel called to do, as long as they report everything, they record everything, they take a note of everything they do and the effects. And then after a week, we meet up together online and we share and compare the results. And so typically, because it's a new remedy, we don't know what we're looking for. So we're completely open. But what happens and what we are looking for, I mean, in terms of effects, we don't know what the results are going to be. But what we're looking for is the effects that most of the provers in the group or all of the provers in the group have experienced. So if we all experience a certain symptom, or the majority of the group experiences a certain symptom, that particular symptom will be part of the description of that remedy, will be listed in the materia medica of that remedy. So I'll give you an example. When we proved moldavite, we all had burning sensation. I had burning sensation under my feet, and that was something that a lot of the provers in the group felt, and it was independent from each other. We don't communicate to each other with each other during the week that we're proving, and so we knew that this was a symptom, this was an important characteristic of that remedy, and so burning is a characteristic of that remedy. If there are particular dreams that come up for that particular remedy, they too go in the materia medica, in the description of that remedy. Because remember that every homeopathy works on every level of the human existence. So the mental plane, the emotional plane, the physical plane, they're all affected. And so each remedy has a list of symptoms related to each of these levels. And so again, for example, because we all felt this burning sensation when we were proving moldavite, burning is one of the main symptoms, which means that moldavite is a good remedy to give for people who were affected by burns. And because of the origins of moldavite, and because the provers all had dreams and visions during meditation of extraterrestrial worlds and the galactic links with stars and so on. The radiation link also came up, and this is why moldavite can be a useful remedy for radiation burns or people going through chemotherapy. It can relieve the burning sensation that sometimes is a side effect of radiotherapy or chemotherapy. So this is the way that provings work. It's quite an exciting experience because you never know what's going to come up. Very often it's a very personal journey of discovery. The provers find out something more about themselves, or sometimes during the meditation or through the dreams, old symptoms come back, old traumas, if they're there from childhood, or memories that had been buried for years resurface because they need to be dealt with. So it's a very interesting journey of self-discovery, as well as of discovering what that particular remedy can do. Because it's Tanzanite, I would also be very curious to see whether the location, the geography plays a part, because that also happens with remedies. For example, when I proved pearl, I had a lot of dreams about Japan. And that's because most of the pearls that we find on the market now are cultivated in Japan. That's where they come from. I had a lot of dreams of white, the color white. So the substance, the geography, the origin of the substance comes through in different way. I remember reading a proving of jade. I didn't do that proving. It was Jeremy Sher and his wife and their students did a group proving of jade, green jade. And they had a lot of connections with China in different ways. They started to be really interested in martial arts, or the synchronicities started to pop up, like, the movies about martial arts started to appear, on TV. They would switch on the TV and this thing about so-and-so or something about China would pop up. So these things happen. The geography, the location also plays a part. The Tanzanite mines are not far from Mount Kilimanjaro. And I wonder if that plays a part. That's a very important location, not just for geographical reason, but for all sorts of cultural, it's a reference point for so many people. So it would be really interesting to see what comes up and what Tanzanite can actually do. So I'm looking for provers. So if you're interested in going through this journey, and it's a bit of an adventure, you can contact me, and the best way to contact me is by email. So you can email me at info@homeopathyheal.co.uk. So that's homeopathyheal.co.uk. I think it would be interesting. I don't know. I don't know what you think, But that's my next proving. By the way, I do have the pieces of Tanzanite for about 10, 12 people. So you don't need to buy that if you are interested. But this is basically how provings work and how I have done provings in the past. I don't know if this is of interest to anybody. It's something that I would say the provers do not need to be expert in homeopathy. Usually it's homeopathy students because the provings are done in schools of homeopathy, but I think it's good to open it up a little bit more. So you don't need to know very much about homeopathy. It is advisable to be healthy while you are proving a remedy. A bit of a downer is that it's really best not to drink alcohol while you're proving. So you don't want to be affected by externalities too much. So if you're going through a period of stress, if you're too busy, if you are moving house, if you are really stressed out at work, I would not advise to do a proving. The best way to go through proving is to be in a kind of, stable period of your life where nothing much is happening. There's not too much upheaval in your life, and you feel good. You're in a good place. That's what I would say. Because sometimes it can be, particularly with gemstones, sometimes it can be a little bit of an adventure. Like I said, dark things, secrets can come out from your past. Emotional ups and downs can happen. So you need to be prepared. But I can fill you in with more details if you want to ask any question. Like I said, email me and I can give you more details about that. So yes, Tanzanite is one of the provings that I would really like to do, purely because it's never been done before. There are a lot of crystals that have not been proved homeopathically yet, but Tanzanite is unique in the sense that it's also a new precious stone. So I have other crystals that I would like to prove in the future, like Herkimer diamonds, for example, which are also interesting. There is a lot of talk about tektites as well. Tektites are meteorites hitting the earth and creating these, they're not crystals. Technically, that's why they're called tektites. They're molten rocks that crystallize, and they form these what look like almost glass or burnt charcoal almost. I have one here that I'm wearing today, and yeah, it's black. This is a tektite, and it looks black. It's not sparkly or anything, but there is a lot of interest in these kind of crystals, let's say, for lack of a better word, tektites, because of their origin, because of their extraterrestrial origin. And these things come into our consciousness for a reason when we need them. There is a whole new interest in extraterrestrial phenomena at the moment for lots of reasons. And so it's not a surprise that we are more curious about meteorites and tektites and also volcanic rocks that are formed into crystals. So, yeah, I would say that I wanted to talk about Tanzanite after talking about the history of witch hunt, so that perhaps you feel more comfortable about crystals now. I hope so. And I wanted to really share the truth about crystals, about what they can do, and why it's perfectly natural to use them, to have them around, to treat them like we have been treating plants and flowers as healing aids to us, particularly in view of the recent scientific discoveries, what we know about quantum physics, what the scientists are telling us about electromagnetic properties. I mean, when you think about it, can you see the Wi-Fi? How do you know there is this thing called Wi-Fi? Well, you know it because of the fact that I'm talking to you and you can see me, and we all have laptops and phones and this and that, but that is the end result of Wi-Fi. You cannot see it, and yet it exists. And so it's the same with electromagnetic properties, frequencies. They are telling us now that frequency is a thing. We are frequency. Everything is frequency, and everything emanates a frequency and energy. And every frequency is unique. And so it's the same with crystals. Crystals have demonstrably, it's actually demonstrated that they do produce electromagnetic frequencies. And these frequencies do affect everything around them. Like our frequency, our energy affect everything, everybody else around us. You know, when you come into a room and it's full of people and there is a really bad atmosphere, everybody can sense that. And you say, "Ooh, there's an atmosphere." Oh, you could cut it with a knife, but you can't see it, you can't touch it, but you know it's there. And it's not your imagination either. So these things now can be proven. So that's why I feel a little bit uncomfortable when some people still advertise themselves as magic or healers or witchy, or they put on that, the magician hat and the witchy hat. We don't need to do that. That's what I'm saying. It's crystal healings are a thing. They are real. And we need to trust ourselves a little bit more. We need to trust our intuition a little bit more. And by doing that, we can learn to know ourselves and be true to ourselves. So hopefully next time somebody says to you, "Oh, you're into crystals, is that a bit..." You can say, "Well, have you ever heard of St. Hildegard?" So yeah, I hope you have enjoyed this show. And if you want to contact me, again, info@homeopathyheal.co.uk. I am happy to answer any of your questions. If you want to work with me, you can go to my website, homeopathyheal.co.uk. There's plenty of material there, free content, my blog, and you can sign up to my free newsletter, and also visit my Facebook page, Homeopathy Heals. And yeah, I hope to see you next time. Thank you very much. Have a lovely weekend.
This show is not intended to diagnose, prevent, or treat any diseases or illnesses. The information presented within cannot substitute the advice of your physician or other trained healthcare professionals. The content of this show is for educational purposes only and is the expressed opinion of the show host and guests.